I'm Joe Halco, Director of Community Relations for Northwestern Counseling and Support Services, and welcome to another episode of NCSS Here for You. Each month on this program, we discuss a human services topic of interest to local residents, and we do that with staff from NCSS. This month's episode is titled, What's My Personality? Many factors shape a person's personality type. A person's preferences relative to attitudes, functions, and lifestyle are what shape their unique personality. To discuss the subject of personality in greater detail, I'm pleased to introduce this month's guest, and that would be Ted Mabel, who is the Executive Director of Northwestern Counseling and Support Services. Ted, welcome to the program. Ted, to begin with, how do we define personality?
Well, the word personality comes from the Latin word persona, and it was taken from the Actors Guild in Greco-Roman times in terms of a mask, and having a mask on your face to portray the emotion that you want. And a definition would be that it is a sort of a pattern of interacting and perceiving your environment and how you accept and how you manage your environment. And it's one of the interesting things we'll get into later is that there's now some evidence that it's genetic in the sense that we are all born predisposed to a certain type of personality. And while that can be molded as you go through the years, that there is some sort of genetic factor to it.
And how do we define the personality pathology?
Well, personality pathology is defined very similar in terms of it's sort of an abnormal way of perceiving and interacting with your environment, and ties very closely to social norms. So what may be acceptable in one culture in terms of behaving won't be acceptable in another culture. So certainly on the extremes, there would be probably more agreement, but it is sort of defined by the culture that you're in terms of what's acceptable and not acceptable.
And what is temperament along those lines?
The word temperament really goes back to trying to clarify that personality is formed genetically, that you were born into this world predisposed with certain genetically to a certain personality type, as a term that we'll use. And so that's what the word temperament means, that you're born with a certain temperament.
And for everybody, how does personality differ from one's character?
Character is more related to moral development. Character generally is not genetically. We don't think it's genetically predisposed, although there's some with brain research now. There's beginning to be an argument that there may be from brain research some predisposition to certain kinds of moral development. But given the fact that generally what's acceptable as moral development generally happens, first of all, shaped by parenting, good or bad parenting, and then as you move into adolescence, it's very much shaped by the peer group that you fall into, and then interesting enough, as you enter adulthood, very much shaped by the environment that you're in terms of your workplace. So it's sort of values. Character really relates to a sort of set of values in moral development that's greatly influenced by the environment you're in.
By those particular factors.
That's right.
And that's why there could be such a disparity with people because of those situations.
That's right.
I mean,
and actually can change over time. You may be at a certain place of your time as you're 4 or 5 years old, 6 years old, because you're very much shaped by the values of your family. But then the peer group takes over, and it can often coax you into a different set of values that are antithetical to what the family values really are. And often, i.e., it's very common to see conflict in adolescence between the adolescent and their parent. And then interesting enough, which is just really recent data, that it can kind of reverse again or be reshaped again by the work environment you're in. Plays a major role. So structure drives behavior, there's an old saying. And so sort of the environment you're in sort of drives often the value system that you form and how you behave. Very interesting from that standpoint.
That is.
We all like to think we're independent people making our own decisions. And the fact of the matter is we're very much controlled by the environment that we're in. and shaped by the environment, whether we like it or not.